She stood barefoot in the snow, 19 years old, while her uncle haggled over her price. Not money, a horse. He wanted to trade her for a horse. Her toes had gone numb an hour ago, but that was nothing compared to the numbness spreading through her chest as she watched two men decide her fate like she was livestock. She didn't cry, couldn't anymore. Just waited to see which man would own her next. This is the story of Clara Whitmore, a girl traded like property who discovered she was worth more than gold. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far her story travels. The snow had been falling for 3 days straight, turning Bitter Creek, Montana into something from a fever dream. Everything white and silent and suffocating. Clara stood in the yard behind her uncle's house, her thin dress doing nothing against the January wind that cut through fabric like it wasn't even there. Her feet were bare, had been since her uncle dragged her out of the house that morning. "Makes you look pitiful," he'd said, grinning with teeth that hadn't seen a toothbrush in years. Desperate, that's what sells. Desperate. Clara almost laughed. She'd been desperate for 7 years. Ever since her parents died and Uncle Gerald took her in. Took her in and took everything else. "Stop shivering," Gerald barked, now shooting her a look that made her lock her knees. "You're embarrassing me." Two men stood 10 feet away. One was her uncle, 50 years old, stinking of whiskey, even at 10 in the morning, his gut hanging over a belt he'd punched new holes in because he was too cheap to buy one that fit. The other man was a stranger, tall, maybe 6'3", broad shoulders under a heavy coat that looked warm. Clara hated him for that coat, hated him for the boots on his feet, for the hat that kept snow out of his eyes, for the fact that he was standing there looking at a horse tied to the fence post like it was the most interesting thing in the world, while she froze. "Fine animal," Gerald was saying, running his hand along the horse's neck. 4 years old, strong, even-tempered. You won't find better in 3 territories. The stranger didn't respond, just kept studying the horse with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something Clara couldn't. His face was weathered, the kind of weathered that came from years in the sun and wind. Maybe 40, maybe older. Hard to tell with men like that. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, and they hadn't looked at her once. "What do you say, Thorne?" Gerald pressed. "We got a deal." Thorne. So that was his name, James Thorne. Clara had heard it whispered in town once or twice, always followed by hushed comments about tragedy. His wife, his daughter, fire, death. Things people didn't talk about directly, but couldn't stop talking about. "Horse is acceptable," Thorne said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel. "Acceptable." Gerald laughed, and the sound made Clara's stomach turn. "That's the finest mare in Bitter Creek. Show some appreciation." "I said it's acceptable." Something shifted in Thorne's posture. Not much, just a subtle straightening. "We doing this or not?" Gerald's grin widened, and Clara felt her heart drop into her feet. Here it comes. "Deal is this," Gerald said, savoring each word like candy. "You give me that horse, I give you her." He jerked his thumb toward Clara without looking. The world stopped. Not in a dramatic way. The wind kept blowing, snow kept falling. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But for Clara, everything compressed into a single point of horror, so sharp it didn't even hurt anymore. Just was. Thorne's eyes finally cut to her, quick, assessing. Clara wanted to disappear, wanted the snow to bury her right there. But his gaze didn't crawl over her body the way men's eyes usually did. Didn't linger on anything except her face. And for just a second, just 1 second, she thought she saw something that looked almost like recognition. Then he looked away. "No," he said. Clara's breath caught. "No?" Gerald's voice went dangerous. "The hell you mean no? I came to look at a horse." Thorne's tone didn't change. Maddeningly calm. "Nobody said nothing about—" He gestured vaguely toward Clara, then stopped like he didn't want to finish the sentence. About a girl. Come on, Thorn. Gerald stepped forward, voice dropping into something that was supposed to sound reasonable. Everyone knows you've been alone on that ranch since the fire. 5 years, ain't it? 5 years rattling around that place like a ghost. You need help. She needs a home. I need that horse. Everybody wins. Find another buyer. Thorn moved to untie his own horse, a massive black stallion that had been waiting patiently nearby. He was leaving. He was actually leaving. Panic flared in Clara's chest. "Wait," she said. Both men turned. Gerald's face was flushed with fury. Thorn's was unreadable. "Please." The word came out cracked, broken. "Please don't leave me here." Silence. "Shut your mouth," Gerald hissed, starting toward her. Thorn's horse shifted, suddenly positioned between Gerald and Clara. The movement looked accidental. Clara didn't think it was. "That true?" Thorn asked quietly, still looking at her. "He hurt you?" "She's a liar," Gerald spat. "Drama queen. Don't listen to—" "I'm asking her." Thorn's voice was still quiet, but something in it made Gerald shut up. "Girl, is it true?" 1,000 answers crowded Clara's throat. "Yes, every day. In ways that don't show. In ways I don't have words for. In ways that hollowed me out and left nothing but survival." What came out was simpler. "Yes." Thorn was quiet for a long moment. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words too bitter to swallow. "The horse for the girl," he said, finally looking at Gerald. "That's the deal." Triumph flashed across Gerald's face. "That's the deal. And after that, you don't come looking for her. Don't show up at my property. Don't send anyone else. She's done with you. Clear?" "Clear as crystal." Gerald was already moving toward the mare. "She's all yours, Thorn, and good riddance." Thorn dismounted, tied his stallion back to the fence, walked toward Clara. She tensed instinctively, every muscle locking up in anticipation of pain that had become so normal she didn't know how to not expect it. But he stopped a respectful distance away. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through dark hair at his temples, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He looked tired, not sleepy tired, soul tired. "You got anything inside you need?" he asked. Clara shook her head. Everything she owned could fit in a flour sack. None of it was worth going back into that house for. "All right, you know how to ride?" "No, sir." He nodded like he'd expected that. "You'll ride with me then. That okay?" The fact that he was asking, the fact that he was treating her like someone whose opinion mattered. Clara felt something crack in her chest. She managed a nod. Thorn mounted first, reached down. His hand was calloused, scarred, the hand of someone who'd spent his life working. Clara took it. His grip was firm but careful as he pulled her up. She'd never been this close to a man who wasn't hurting her. Her whole body was rigid with waiting for pain that didn't come. "Hold on," he said quietly. "It's a ways." Behind them, Gerald was already leading the mare away. Didn't even bother to watch them leave. Clara didn't look back either. Couldn't. If she looked back, she might see what she was leaving, and if she saw it, she might feel something, and if she felt something, she might break completely. They rode in silence as the snow kept falling. The temperature was dropping. Clara started shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Without a word, Thorn shrugged out of his coat and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else. Something that might have been safety, though Clara barely remembered what that felt like. The ride took maybe an hour. They left the main road following a narrow path that wound up into the foothills. When they finally crested a rise, Clara saw it. A cabin, small but solid, lamplight glowing in one window. A barn stood nearby, recently built by the look of it, fenced pastures spreading out into the darkness. Thorn guided the stallion to the barn first, dismounted, helped Clara down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. She'd been clenching every muscle for so long she'd forgotten how to relax. This is Midnight, Thorn said, gesturing to his stallion. Don't walk up behind him sudden-like, otherwise he's gentle. It was such a normal thing to say, such an ordinary piece of information. Clara almost laughed. She didn't, though. Just stood there, shaking while Thorn unsaddled Midnight, his movements practiced and efficient. Another horse nickered from a stall, a gray mare who stuck her head out to investigate. That's Silver, Thorn said. She's friendly, nosy, but friendly. When he finished with Midnight, he led Clara toward the cabin. The porch creaked under their weight. He paused at the door. It's not much, he said, something almost apologetic in his tone. But it's warm, dry. You'll have your own room. He stopped, reconsidered. There's 2 bedrooms, mine and... Another pause. The other room. You'll take that one. I'll get a fire going. He pushed open the door, stepped aside to let Clara enter first. The cabin was exactly like he'd said. Not much. One main room serving as kitchen and living area. Stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table with 2 chairs near the window. Everything clean, but bare. Functional, not comfortable. It felt like a place where someone existed but didn't live. The only decoration was a small shelf holding a few books and a wooden box. Thorn moved past her to the fireplace, knelt to build up the banked coals. Clara stood near the door, still wrapped in his coat, watching him work. The firelight painted his profile in gold and shadow. Strong jaw, bent neck, concentration in every movement. Coffee, he asked without looking up. Yes, thank you. Sit down. You look ready to fall over. Clara sank into one of the chairs. Her legs were shaking. Now that she wasn't required to stand, her body was giving out. She watched Thorn fill a pot with water from a pump at the sink, measure out coffee grounds with methodical care. While the coffee heated, he opened a cabinet, pulled out bread, cheese, dried meat. You eaten today? He asked. Clara tried to remember. Couldn't. I don't think so. Thorn nodded, cut thick slices of bread and cheese, arranged them on 2 tin plates with the meat, pushed one across the table to her. They ate in silence. Clara tried not to wolf down the food, despite her stomach screaming. When had she last had a full meal? Days. Maybe longer. The coffee was ready soon. Thorn poured 2 cups. The liquid was dark, bitter, but hot. Clara wrapped her cold fingers around the cup like it was precious. Rules, Thorn said suddenly. Clara tensed. Here it comes. The conditions, the expectations, the price. You work if you want to. He continued, still not quite looking at her. There's plenty needs doing. Cooking, cleaning, mending. But you don't have to. Not right away. You've been... He paused. You've had a hard time. Probably need time to figure things out. I can work, Clara said quickly. Too quickly. I'm a good worker. I can... I'm sure you can. Thorn's voice was patient. But I'm saying you don't have to prove nothing. Not to me. Clara stared at him, trying to understand what kind of trick this was. Men didn't buy women because that's what he'd done. No point pretending otherwise without expecting something. Your room is yours, Thorn went on. There's a lock on the door, from the inside. I won't bother you. Finally, he met her eyes. His expression was serious. I know what this looks like. Know what you're probably thinking. But I didn't bring you here to... He stopped, jaw tight. That's not what this is. Then what is it? The question came out sharper than Clara intended. Thorn was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. I saw you standing there looking like you'd given up everything, and I thought about riding away. Thought about it real hard. But then you said he was going to kill you, and I... He exhaled roughly. I couldn't, that's all. Couldn't leave you there. So, this is charity. Something defensive flared in Clara's chest. No. Thorn's answer was immediate. This is a trade. You need a place safer than what you had. I need... He searched for words. I need to not live in a tomb anymore. Maybe having someone else here will help with that. Maybe it won't. But either way, you're not charity. You're not property. You're just here. Clara didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do with kindness that came without visible strings, so she stayed silent, drank her coffee while the fire crackled and wind howled outside. Eventually, Thorn stood. Come on, I'll show you the room. He led her through a door on the far side of the main room. Short hallway, 2 doors, one closed, one open. Thorn gestured to the open one. That's yours. Clara stepped inside. The room was small, plain. A narrow bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, a single window looking out toward dark shapes of mountains. But it was clean. The bed looked soft, and there was a candle on the windowsill. Extra blankets in the chest if you get cold, Thorn said from the doorway. And like I said, door locks from the inside. He pulled a key from his pocket, held it out. Clara took it. The metal was warm from his body heat. Anything else you need? He asked. About 1,000 things, Clara thought. Safety, answers, some guarantee this wasn't just a prettier cage. What she said was, no, this is fine, thank you. Thorn nodded. Try to get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He left, closed the door behind him. Clara stood frozen, listening to his footsteps retreat. The sound of him moving through the main room, banking the fire, washing dishes, normal sounds, domestic sounds. Slowly she moved to the door, turned the key. The lock clicked into place with a soft sound that felt like the loudest thing in the world. She pressed her palm against the wood, felt how solid it was, how sturdy. A door that locked from the inside, a room that was hers. Something in Clara's chest cracked open, just a little. She turned back to the bed, pulled off Thorn's coat and folded it carefully on the chest. Then lay down fully clothed. The quilt smelled like cedar and lavender. Someone had stored it with sachets, probably years ago. She pulled it up to her chin, stared at the ceiling where shadows danced in candlelight. She'd been sold today, traded for a horse like livestock. By all rights, she should be sobbing, screaming, breaking down completely. Instead, she felt numb, hollow, like all the fear and pain and shame had finally filled her up so completely there was no room left for new emotions. Outside, an owl called. Wind rattled the window. Somewhere in the cabin, James Thorn, the stranger who'd bought her freedom, or maybe just traded one prison for another, was settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more questions, or something worse than either. But tonight, Clara had a locked door and a warm bed. Tonight, that was enough. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, she slept without listening for her uncle's footsteps in the hall. The silence was strange, foreign, almost frightening in its completeness. But it was hers, and that small, fragile thing was something like hope. Go. Clara woke to silence. That was the first strange thing. No sound of her uncle stumbling drunk through the house. No crashes from the kitchen. No shouting. Just quiet broken only by the crackle of a fire somewhere beyond her door. The second strange thing was warmth. She was warm. Actually warm. The quilt was thick. The room wasn't drafty and her feet didn't ache from cold. The third strange thing was remembering where she was. She sat up fast, heart hammering. The room came into focus. Small, plain. Not her uncle's house. Thorn's cabin. She'd been sold yesterday. Traded for a horse. This was real. Clara pressed her hands to her face, trying to slow her breathing. Through the door, she could hear movement. Footsteps. The sound of someone working. Thorn was already up. She stood on shaky legs. Her dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it, her hair a mess. She finger-combed it as best she could, then stood at the door with her hand on the key, trying to find courage. What was she supposed to do? What did he expect? The rules he'd laid out last night seemed too good to be true. Men always wanted something. Clara unlocked the door, stepped into the hallway. The main room was empty, but the fire was built up and coffee sat on the stove. A plate of bread and butter waited on the table. Next to it, a note in rough handwriting, "Help yourself. I'm in the barn." Clara stared at the note. He'd made breakfast and left. Didn't wait for her. Didn't demand she serve him. Just made food and went to work. She ate slowly every bite, feeling like something she didn't deserve. The bread was fresh. Someone Thorne had baked it recently. The coffee was strong but good. When she finished, she washed her plate and cup, stood in the middle of the room unsure. Should she stay inside? Go outside? What was she allowed to do? The uncertainty was almost worse than her uncle's cruelty. At least there she'd known the rules, knew what would earn a beating and what wouldn't. Here she had no map. Finally, Clara wrapped herself in Thorne's coat, still draped over the chair where she'd left it, and stepped outside. The world was blinding white. Snow everywhere, pure and untouched, except for a single set of footprints leading to the barn. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but the sky was clear blue, beautiful in a way that made Clara's chest ache. She followed the footprints. The barn was warmer than outside, heated by the horses' bodies and insulated hay. Thorne stood in one of the stalls with the gray mare brushing her coat in long, steady strokes. He glanced up when Clara entered. "Morning," he said. Not surprised, not annoyed, just greeting. "Morning." Coffee was still warm. "Yes, thank you, and for the bread." Thorne nodded and went back to brushing. Silver the mare turned her head to look at Clara with large, curious eyes. Clara stood awkwardly by the door, hands tucked into the coat pockets, watching. Thorne worked with patient efficiency, his movements practiced. This was someone who'd done this every day for years, who'd learned to do everything himself because there was no one else. "You can come closer if you want," Thorne said without looking up. "She's gentle." Clara took a few steps forward. Silver nickered softly. "Hold out your hand," Thorne said. "Flat. Like this." He demonstrated. "Let her smell you." Clara extended her hand palm up. The mare's nose was soft as velvet as she snuffled Clara's fingers. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered. "She knows it too." There was almost warmth in Thorne's voice. "Vain as they come." He finished brushing and moved to the next stall. Midnight, the black stallion tossed his head as Thorne approached. "Easy," Thorne murmured. "Just me." Clara watched him work through both horses, then a third, a young chestnut gelding he called Copper. The routine was soothing, predictable, safe. "You know anything about horses?" Thorne asked as he measured out grain. "No, sir." "Want to learn?" The question caught Clara off guard. Want. When was the last time someone asked what she wanted? "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would." Thorne spent the next hour teaching her how to approach without spooking them, where to stand, how to read their ears and eyes and posture, how to offer treats, apple slices from the root cellar flat-palmed so fingers didn't get mistaken for food. Copper. The young gelding was enthusiastic and clumsy. He nuzzled Clara's shoulder, then tried to eat her hair. "He's still a baby," Thorne explained, pulling Copper's head away. 3 years old, thinks everything's a game. Clara found herself smiling. Actually smiling. "He's sweet." "He's a menace." But there was affection in Thorne's voice. They worked together until mid-morning, when Thorne declared it time for a break. Back in the cabin, Clara made more coffee while Thorne washed up at the pump. They sat at the table, and for the first time the silence felt almost comfortable. "Thank you," Clara said suddenly, "for teaching me." Thorne looked at her over his coffee cup. "You're a quick learner." "My uncle never let me near the animals. Said I'd spook them or hurt them or—" She stopped. Why was she talking about Gerald? "He was wrong," Thorne said quietly. "You've got gentle hands. Natural way with them." The compliment made Clara's throat tight. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Thorne nodded. Why did you do it? Really buy me, I mean. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. My wife, he said finally. Sarah. She died 5 years ago. Her and our daughter both. Fire took the old cabin. I got Sarah out first, then went back for Emma. She was 4. His voice went flat. Didn't make it. Smoke got her before I could. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry. Sarah died 2 days later. Burns were too bad. She kept asking for Emma. I didn't have the heart to tell her our girl was already gone, so I lied. Said Emma was fine, safe, that she'd see her soon. He looked up and his eyes were terrible. Last words she heard were lies. They were mercy, Clara said firmly. That's not the same thing. Thorne shook his head. Maybe. Doesn't matter now. They're both gone, and I've been here alone ever since. Just existing, not living, not dead, just taking up space. That doesn't explain why you bought me. I saw you standing there, Thorne said, looking like you'd given up, like you were already gone even though you were still breathing. And I thought... He stopped, started again. I thought that's what I looked like, for 5 years. Dead inside, but still walking around. And I couldn't leave you there. Couldn't let you become what I'd been. Clara's hands were shaking. She set down her cup before she spilled it. So this is about saving yourself, she said. Not accusing, just understanding. Maybe. Or maybe it's about both of us getting a second chance. I don't know. Thorne stood taking his cup to the sink. But you're here now. And you're safe. That's what matters. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clara woke each morning to find the cabin already warm. Coffee already made, Thorne already working. She'd eat, then join him in the barn. He taught her how to curry the horses, how to clean hooves, how to measure grain, and read the subtle signals that meant content or discomfort. She started cooking, real cooking. Not the joyless meals she'd thrown together while Gerald shouted criticisms. Here she could take her time, could experiment with the limited supplies in the pantry. She made stews that simmered for hours, bread that filled the cabin with warmth, dried apple pie from the gnarled tree near the barn. Thorne never asked her to cook, never expected or demanded, but she saw the way his eyes softened when he came in from the cold to find supper waiting. The way he ate slowly, like he was savoring not just the food, but the fact of it. The presence of another person. The small miracle of not being alone. One evening, maybe a week after she'd arrived, Clara was washing dishes when Thorne spoke from behind her. This is good. What you're doing here. She turned. He was standing by the fire holding a book but not reading it. The cooking, she asked. All of it. The cooking, the cleaning, the company. He paused. I've been eating like a bachelor for 5 years. Beans and bread. This. He gestured at the cabin. The warm light. The lingering smell of stew. This is more than I knew I needed. Clara's chest felt tight. You've given me everything. Least I can do is cook. It's not about debt. Thorne set down the book. I don't want you doing this because you think you owe me. I want you doing it because you want to. Or not doing it at all. Your choice. I want to, Clara said. And realized she meant it. I like cooking, like making something good. My mother used to... She stopped. Used to what? She used to bake bread every Saturday. The house would smell like yeast and butter. She'd let me help knead the dough. Said the secret was patience and love. Clara's voice cracked. She died when I was 12. Fever took her. My father followed 6 months later. That's when Gerald took me in. And he hurt you. It wasn't a question. Every day. The words came easier now. Never where it showed much. Bruises where clothes covered them. Words that cut deeper than fists. He said I was worthless. A burden. Said I should be grateful he didn't just leave me to starve. He's a liar, Thorne said flatly. And a coward. Clara looked at him. At this grieving man who'd lost everything and somehow still had room in his broken heart for anger on her behalf. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing that, for saying it." They stood there in the lamplight, and something shifted. Some wall developed a crack. Through it, Clara could see the shape of who Thorn had been before tragedy carved him hollow. Could imagine what it might be like if they both healed enough to be whole. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That night, lying in her bed, Clara realized she hadn't thought about Gerald all day, hadn't braced for violence, hadn't measured every movement for potential threat. 1 week of peace. It didn't erase 19 years of pain, but it was something. The second week brought a snowstorm that buried them for 3 days. Clara woke the first morning to find the world transformed. Snow piled against the windows, the barn barely visible through the white curtain. "We're snowed in," Thorn said over breakfast. "Happens sometimes. We've got enough supplies to last. Just have to wait it out." Being trapped should have made Clara anxious. Instead, she felt oddly safe. The storm was a barrier between her and the rest of the world. Between her and Gerald. Nothing could reach her here. They spent the days doing small tasks, mending clothes, repairing tack, reading. Thorn had maybe a dozen books, and he offered to teach Clara to read better. She knew some her mother had taught her the basics, but Gerald had never seen the point in more. "I want to read your books," she told Thorn. "Want to read anything I want without struggling." So he taught her, patient and encouraging as she stumbled through words that had once seemed impenetrable. They sat by the fire, shoulders nearly touching, while wind howled outside and time seemed to stop. "You're doing good," Thorn said as she finished a page without help. "Real good." The pride in his voice made Clara's eyes sting. One evening she started humming while she cooked. Didn't realize she was doing it until she caught Thorn watching her, his expression unreadable. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing. Just—" He paused. "Sarah used to hum like that. Drove me crazy at first, but then the house was too quiet after and I missed it." Clara started to apologize, but Thorn held up a hand. "Don't stop, please. It's good to have sound in here again. Life." So Clara kept humming, and if her voice wavered a little, neither of them mentioned it. The third day of the storm, Clara found it while organizing the root cellar. A wooden toy horse, barely bigger than her palm, charred black on one side. "That was Emma's." Thorn's voice came from behind her, quiet. "Only thing I could save from her room." Clara turned the toy cradled in her hands. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's all right." Thorn descended the cellar steps slowly. "I kept meaning to put it somewhere proper. Just never could figure out where." He took the toy from her, his thumb rubbing over the scorched wood. "Sarah's father made it when Emma was born. Hand-carved from cedar. Emma loved this thing. Took it everywhere." His voice thickened. "Used to make it gallop across the table during supper. Sarah would pretend to scold her, but she was always smiling." "She sounds like she was wonderful," Clara said softly. "She was. She was everything." Thorn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "And I couldn't save her. Couldn't save either of them." Without thinking, Clara reached out and took his hand. The one not holding the toy. Thorn flinched, then stilled, looking down at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. "It wasn't your fault," Clara said firmly. "You tried. You went back. That's more than most would do. That's everything." "It wasn't enough. It was all you could do, and Sarah knew that." Clara squeezed his hand. "I never met her, but I know she knew that. A mother, a wife who loved you, she wouldn't blame you." "Maybe." Thorn's voice was raw. "But I blame myself." They stood there in the dim cellar, surrounded by jars of preserves and hanging onions, holding on to each other like drowning people who'd found driftwood. Eventually, Thorn pulled his hand away gently, wiped his eyes. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for listening. For just thank you." "Anytime," Clara told him, and meant it. The storm broke on the fourth day. Clara woke to brilliant sunshine reflecting off snow so bright it hurt to look at. The world was clean, new, transformed. She stood at her window watching light dance across the drifts and felt something shift in her chest. Something that might have been hope. Thorn knocked softly on her doorframe. She'd left the door open, had been doing that more often lately. "Snow's deep," he said. "But we need to check on the horses. Make sure the barn roof held." They bundled into coats and boots. Thorn had found her boots that fit, appeared one morning outside her door, and waded through snow that came up to Clara's knees. The barn was fine. The horses were restless from being cooped up, but healthy. Copper immediately tried to eat Clara's hat. "Menace," she said, laughing as she pulled it away from his mouth. Thorn was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What?" she asked. "You laughed. That's the first time I've heard you really laugh." Clara realized he was right. "I guess I haven't had much to laugh about before." "You do now," Thorn said, and something in his voice made her heart skip. They worked together, feeding and watering the horses. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. Clara knew which horse liked which stall, who needed more grain, who would try to nip if you weren't careful. "You're good with them," Thorn observed. "Natural. I like them. They're honest. You're kind to them. They're kind back. Simple." "Wish people were that straightforward," Thorn muttered. Clara glanced at him. "Your wife Sarah, she liked horses. Loved them. Grew up on a ranch in Wyoming. Could ride before she could walk, or so she claimed." He paused, lost in memory. "When we married, she made me promise we'd build something together. A real horse farm. Breeding stock, training them proper." "What happened?" "We had 5 years, got the land, built the barn, bought Midnight and the mares. Then—" He stopped. "Fire. Never got around to the breeding part." The grief in his voice was so thick Clara could almost touch it. "You could still do it," she said quietly. "She'd want you to finish what you started." Thorn looked at her for a long moment. Maybe with help I could." The implication hung in the air between them. With help. With her help. "I'd like that," Clara said. "I'd like to help you build something." Something flickered in Thorn's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then we'll do it. Come spring, we'll start proper. Breed the mares. Make this place what it was supposed to be." It was a promise. A commitment to a future that included both of them. That evening they sat by the fire, as had become their habit. Thorn was teaching Clara to play chess with a set he'd carved himself. She was terrible at it, but loved the excuse to sit across from him and watch his face relax into concentration. "Your move," he said. Clara studied the board, having no idea what she was doing. She moved a piece at random. Thorn's mouth twitched. "You just put yourself in check." "Did I?" "You know you did." Clara laughed. "I'm hopeless at this." "You're learning. That's different." He moved his piece. "Checkmate." Again. Again. But he was smiling. Actually smiling. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger. Lighter. "Tell me something," Clara said impulsively. "About when you were young. Before all the sadness." Thorn reset the board, considering. "Grew up in Kansas. Farm country. Had 2 brothers and a sister. We were poor but happy. The kind of poor where you don't notice because everyone has enough and nobody's mean about it." "What happened to them?" "Your family." "Still in Kansas, far as I know. We fell out of touch after I married Sarah and moved west. They didn't approve. Thought I was too young. Thought she was too wild." He paused. "Maybe they were right. Haven't written in years. Don't know if they'd even remember me." "You should write to them," Clara said. "Family is, even when it's complicated, it's something." Your family hurt you. My uncle hurt me. My parents loved me. There's a difference. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. I'd give anything to have them back, even for a day, to tell them I turned out all right, that I survived. Thorne looked at her, something soft in his expression. You did more than survive. You're thriving. Maybe not yet, but you will. How do you know? Because you're strong, stronger than you think. He hesitated. And you're not alone anymore. The words settled warm in Clara's chest. A promise and a truth. They sat together as the fire burned low, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. She felt safe. She felt valued. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be happy here. The weeks blurred together. January became February. The snow stayed deep, but they managed. Thorne showed Clara how to snowshoe, how to track animals, how to read the sky for weather. She taught him songs her mother used to sing, and slowly, haltingly, he began to sing them with her. You have a good voice, Clara said one evening, surprised. Why don't you sing more? Haven't had reason to in a long time. Thorne's smile was small but real. Forgot I knew how. One night Clara woke from a nightmare. Gerald's face, his fists, his words. She sat up, gasping, heart-hammering, and couldn't calm down. Couldn't breathe right. A soft knock on her door. Clara, you all right? She couldn't answer, couldn't make words work. The door opened a crack. Thorne stood there, lamplight behind him. Bad dream? He asked gently. She nodded. Want me to stay? Just sit here. Won't touch you. Just be here so you're not alone. Clara nodded again. Thorne pulled the chair from the corner, set it by her door, and sat. Just sat there in the dim light while Clara's breathing slowed, while the panic faded, while she remembered she was safe. Thank you, she finally managed. Anytime. He stayed until she fell back asleep. And when she woke in the morning, the chair was empty, but she knew he'd been there, knew he'd kept watch, knew she mattered to him. That realization was almost as terrifying as her nightmare. Because if she mattered to him, and he mattered to her, and he did, God help her, he did, then she had something to lose again. And losing hurt more than never having it all. February brought a thaw. Not much, just enough to make the snow heavy and wet the roads passable if you were careful. Thorne mentioned needing to ride into Bitter Creek for supplies, and Clara's stomach dropped. I'll come with you, she said before she could think better of it. Thorne looked up from the harness he was mending. You sure town's not people will talk? Let them talk. But her hands were shaking when she said it. The thought of Bitter Creek, of people staring, of maybe seeing Gerald, made her want to crawl back into her locked room and never come out. But staying here alone felt worse somehow, like admitting she was still scared. They left after dawn. Clara rode behind Thorne on midnight, her arms around his waist, trying not to think about how solid he felt, how safe. The ride took 2 hours through melting snow and mud that sucked at the horses' hooves. Bitter Creek looked exactly the same. One main street lined with tired buildings. General store, blacksmith, church, saloon. The kind of town that had once had dreams but settled for survival. People stared when they rode in. Eyes followed them from doorways and windows. Conversations paused, then resumed in furious whispers. Clara felt each look like a physical touch. Thorne's jaw was tight. Ignore them, he said quietly as he dismounted and helped her down. Small towns got nothing better to do than gossip. They walked to the general store, and Clara felt the weight of judgment with every step. The bell above the door chimed their entrance. The woman behind the counter looked up with a smile that froze when she saw them. James, she said slowly. Didn't expect to see you. Mrs. Patterson. Thorne nodded politely. Need to stock up on some things. The woman's eyes cut to Clara, measuring her from head to toe in a way that made Clara want to disappear. I heard you took in one of the Whitmore girls. Didn't believe it. This is Clara, Thorne said flatly. No explanation. No justification. Mrs. Patterson's expression said she was already composing the story she'd tell everyone who came in after them. What can I get you? Thorne rattled off a list. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. Mrs. Patterson gathered items with efficient movements, all while sneaking glances at Clara like she was something curious and slightly dangerous. You settling in all right, dear? She asked with false sweetness. Before Clara could answer, the door opened and another woman entered. This one was different. Older, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back and eyes that were sharp but not unkind. She wore practical clothing and carried herself with quiet authority. James Thorne, she said warmly. About time you showed your face. Miss Hartley. Thorne's posture relaxed slightly. Good to see you. Is it you only come to town when you're desperate? Her gaze shifted to Clara, and unlike Mrs. Patterson's assessment, this felt more like genuine interest. And you must be Clara. I'm Ruth Hartley. I deliver babies, set bones, and generally keep folks around here from dying of their own stupidity. The healer. Clara had heard of her. Everyone in Bitter Creek knew Ruth Hartley. Nice to meet you, ma'am, Clara managed. Walk with me, Ruth said, already moving toward the door. It wasn't really a request. Clara glanced at Thorne, who shrugged slightly. I'll load the supplies. Meet you outside. So Clara followed Ruth into the street, feeling exposed under the continued stares of townspeople. Don't mind them, Ruth said cheerfully, hooking her arm through Clara's like they were old friends. Half these people couldn't find excitement if it bit them. You living with James has given them enough gossip for 6 months. We're not... Clara started, then stopped, unsure how to explain. Not his lover, Ruth finished bluntly. I figured. That boy hasn't looked at a woman that way since Sarah died. You're safe with him if that's what you're worried about. The directness was startling. I didn't... Oh, honey. Ruth squeezed her arm gently. I was there when your uncle tried to marry you off to that rancher from Cooper's Bend. Watched him parade you around like livestock. Heard the stories about how he treated you. Her voice softened. I'm glad you got out. However it happened. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in the middle of town. Listen to me, Ruth continued, steering them toward a quieter side street. I don't know what arrangement you and James have, and it's none of my business. But I want you to know something. She stopped, turning to face Clara directly. You're not a debt child. You're not property. You're not charity. You're a person. A beginning. Don't let anyone, not the gossips, not your past, not even your own guilt, take that from you. I don't know how to be anything else, Clara whispered. Then you learn, one day at a time. Ruth's smile was fierce and warm. And if you ever need help, if things go bad, or you need to talk, or you just want some company that isn't a grieving man and his horses, you come find me. My house is the blue one on Maple Street. Doors always open. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Good girl. Ruth patted her arm. Now let's get you back before James thinks I've kidnapped you. That man worries more than he lets on. They returned to find Thorne waiting with midnight supplies already loaded. He looked between them with mild suspicion. What did she tell you? He asked Clara. That you worry too much, Clara said, before she could think better of it. Ruth laughed, bright and genuine. Smart girl. You keep her, James. She's good for you. She swept off before either of them could respond, leaving Clara and Thorne standing awkwardly in the street. She's not wrong, Thorne said finally. I do worry. He offered his hand to help Clara mount. Ready to go home? Home. The word hit Clara strange. Too big. Too hopeful. Yeah, she said quietly. Let's go home. The ride back was quiet, but it was the comfortable kind of silence that had started to develop between them. Clara leaned against Thorne's back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of him against the cold. She thought about Ruth's words. "You're a beginning." Maybe that was true. Maybe she could be more than the sum of her scars. They were maybe half an hour from the cabin when midnight suddenly balked, ears pinning back. Thorne reined him in hard. "What's wrong?" Clara asked. "Don't know. He doesn't spook easy." Thorne's hand went to the rifle strapped to his saddle. "Something's got him nervous." Then Clara heard it. Voices. Men's voices. Coming from the direction of the cabin. Thorne's whole body went rigid. "Hold on tight." He urged Midnight forward at a careful walk, one hand on the reins, one on his rifle. As they crested the final rise, Clara saw them. 3 men on horseback in front of the cabin. And even from a distance, even though she couldn't see his face clearly, Clara knew. Gerald. He'd come back. "Get down." Thorne said, his voice hard as iron. "Get behind those rocks and stay there. Don't come out no matter what you hear." James. Now Clara. She slid off Midnight, her legs almost giving out. Thorne dismounted, checked his rifle, and started toward the cabin on foot, leading his horse. Clara should have stayed hidden, should have obeyed. But she couldn't just crouch behind rocks while Thorne faced her uncle alone. She crept forward, keeping low until she could see and hear. "Thorne." Gerald's voice was slurred. "Drunk. Thought you might show up eventually." "Get off my property, Whitmore." Thorne's voice was dead calm. "You got no business here." "Got plenty of business. That girl you took, she's mine. My ward. You had no right. She's 19 years old and you beat her. I had every right." Thorne stopped maybe 20 feet from the 3 men. "And she's not your ward anymore. She's under my protection. Now leave." "Protection?" Gerald spat in the snow. "That what you call it? You bought yourself a whore, Thorne. Least be honest about it." "Watch your mouth," Thorne said, and something in his tone made even the hired men shift nervously. "Or what, you'll shoot me in front of witnesses." Gerald's courage was liquid and false. "That's murder. Self-defense. You came to my home armed with hired guns. Any court would call it justified." Thorne's rifle came up slightly, not pointing yet, but ready. "Now you got a choice. Ride away right now or find out how serious I am." One of the hired men spoke up. "Whitmore, you didn't say nothing about the law being involved." "Shut up," Gerald snarled. "I'm paying you good money. Not enough to hang for." The man was already turning his horse. "Find yourself other fools." The second hired man followed without a word. They rode past Clara's hiding spot without seeing her, heading back toward town at a quick trot. That left Gerald alone, drunk and furious, and suddenly aware he'd miscalculated. "This ain't over," he shouted. "She's mine. I raised her. I got rights." "You got nothing." Thorne's voice was flat. "You gave up any rights when you sold her. And if I ever see you on my property again, if I ever hear you've been bothering her, I won't give you another warning. We clear?" Clara couldn't stay hidden anymore. She stood up, stepping into view, and both men turned. Gerald's face twisted with hate. "There you are, you little—" "I'm done," Clara said. Her voice shook but held. "Do you hear me, Gerald? I'm done being scared of you. Done letting you make me feel worthless. You're nothing. You're a drunk and a coward, and you're nothing." "How dare you?" Gerald started toward her. Thorne moved faster. Suddenly, he was between them, rifle raised. "Don't." One word. Soft as snow, sharp as broken glass. Gerald froze. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then something in Gerald's face crumpled. Not remorse, he was incapable of that. But realization. He'd lost. His power over Clara was gone. "You'll regret this," he said, but the venom was gone from his voice. Just bitterness left. "Both of you." "Only thing I regret," Clara said clearly, "is not standing up to you sooner. Gerald stood there swaying in the melting snow, a broken man who'd never been whole. Then he turned and stumbled toward his horse, mounted with difficulty. He looked back once, and in his eyes was nothing but empty hate. "You ever come back here?" Thorn called after him. "You won't get another chance. You understand?" Gerald didn't answer, just spurred his horse and rode away, disappearing into the gray afternoon like a bad dream fading. The silence that followed felt enormous. Thorn lowered his rifle slowly, still watching the tree line. Only when several minutes had passed with no sign of return did he finally turn to Clara. "You all right?" Clara nodded, then shook her head, then burst into tears. All the fear and pain and relief came pouring out in great gasping sobs. Thorn caught her as her knees gave out, holding her while she shattered. His arms were solid around her, one hand cradling the back of her head while she broke apart in the safety of his embrace. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe. I've got you." Clara cried until there was nothing left. Until the storm passed and she was wrung out but lighter. Thorn held her through all of it, steady as stone, until her breathing slowed and she could stand on her own again. "I thought I'd be scared," she said, pulling back to look at his face. "When I saw him, thought I'd freeze like I always did. But I wasn't. I was angry." "You were magnificent," Thorn said. "Stood your ground, told him the truth. That took real courage. I was terrified. Courage isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway." He touched her face gently, wiping away tears with his thumb. "I'm proud of you." The words hit something deep inside Clara that had been waiting her entire life to hear them. Fresh tears spilled over. "Come on," Thorn said softly. "Let's get inside, get warm." They spent the rest of the day in quiet recovery. Thorn checked the property, made sure Gerald hadn't damaged anything. Clara made coffee with shaking hands and tried to process what had happened. She'd stood up to Gerald, had looked him in the eye and told him he was nothing. And the world hadn't ended. She hadn't been struck down. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. That evening they sat by the fire. Clara wrapped in a blanket, Thorn beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Thank you," she said, "for protecting me, for not letting him take me." "Nothing to thank me for. Told you when you came here you're under my protection. I meant it." "But why?" The question burst out. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." Thorn was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I didn't know you at first, but I do now. Know you're strong even when you feel weak. Know you're kind even after all the cruelty you've suffered. Know you sing when you think nobody's listening and that you cry in your sleep sometimes, but never complain." He paused. "Know that having you here has made this place feel like a home again, instead of a tomb. So yeah, I care. More than I probably should." Clara's heart was hammering. "More than you should. You're 19 years old. I'm 42. You've been through hell. Last thing you need is a broken-down widower with more grief than sense putting pressure on you." "What if I don't see it as pressure?" Clara turned to face him. "What if I—" She stopped, fear and hope warring in her chest. "What if I care too?" Thorn's eyes searched hers. "Clara, I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But being here with you, it's the first time I've felt safe in 7 years. The first time I've felt like I matter. Like I'm worth something." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You make me feel worth something." "You've always been worth something," Thorn said fiercely. "That was never about me. That's you. That's who you are." "Maybe. But you helped me see it." Clara took a breath, gathering courage. "And I don't know what this is between us. Don't know if it's gratitude or something more. But I want to find out. If you want that too." Thorn's hand came up to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle. "I want that," he said roughly. God help me, I want that more than I've wanted anything in 5 years. But Clara, I got ghosts. Got wounds that might never heal proper. There'll be days I'm difficult. Days I'm lost in the past. I've got ghosts too, Clara said. Got wounds of my own. Maybe we can help each other heal them. Maybe we can, Thorn agreed. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're sure about this, about me? I'm sure. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Clara didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with a fierceness that surprised her. Their lips met, gentle at first, tentative. Then deeper, as Clara's hands came up to grip his shirt, and Thorn pulled her closer. It was nothing like she'd imagined. Wasn't frightening or painful or wrong. It was warm and right and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thorn rested his forehead against hers. I care about you, he said. More than care. He stopped, like the words were too big to say yet. I know, Clara whispered. Me too. They sat there wrapped together while the fire burned low and snow began to fall again outside. Two broken people learning to be whole, finding in each other something they'd both thought lost forever. Hope. The next morning brought a visitor. Clara was making breakfast when she heard a horse approaching. She tensed, but Thorn looked out the window and relaxed. It's Ruth, he said. The healer dismounted and stomped snow off her boots before Thorn could even open the door. She took one look at them, at how close they were standing at something in their faces, and smiled. Well, she said. That's settled then. What's settled? Clara asked, confused. You two. Finally figured it out. Ruth set a basket on the table. Brought supplies and came to tell you Gerald left town last night. Word is, he's headed east. Back to wherever he came from. Some of the men at the saloon made it clear he wasn't welcome in Bitter Creek anymore. Relief washed through Clara so strong it made her dizzy. He's really gone. Really gone. Ruth squeezed her hand. It's over, child. You're free. Free. Clara had never really understood that word before. But standing in Thorn's cabin with winter light streaming through the windows, and his hand warm in hers, she was starting to. There's something else. Ruth continued, her expression turning serious. If you two are going to keep living under the same roof, especially now that it's clear there's feelings involved, you need to do it proper, for your sake and his. What are you suggesting? Thorn asked carefully. Marriage, Ruth said flat out. I know it's fast. I know there's complications. But this is a small town with big opinions. You marry her proper, James, and nobody can say a word. She becomes your wife, your partner, your equal, not your property or your charity case or whatever ugliness folks want to whisper. Marriage. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Marriage meant forever, meant commitment, meant trusting that this fragile thing between them could survive. I can't ask her that, Thorn said, looking stricken. It's too much, too fast. She deserves— What do I deserve? Clara interrupted quietly. Tell me, James, what is it you think I deserve? He met her eyes. Better than this. Better than a hasty marriage to a widower twice your age who's still grieving. You deserve romance and courtship and time to figure out what you want without pressure. I'm 19 years old, Clara said, her voice steady. I spent 7 years being told I was worthless, that I deserved nothing but pain. You think I don't know what I want? You think I can't recognize the difference between being used and being valued? She stepped closer to him. I want this. Want you. Want a life where I'm someone's choice, not someone's burden. If you're offering marriage, real partnership, then yes. My answer is yes. Thorn stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. You're sure I've got ghosts, Clara? Wounds that might never— I know, and I've got mine. Maybe we can carry them together, make them lighter. She took his hands. Unless you don't want this, don't want me. God, yes. Thorn pulled her close, fierce and sudden. Want you so much it terrifies me. But I needed to know you wanted it too. That this was real for you. It's real, Clara promised against his chest. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. Ruth cleared her throat loudly. Well, that's settled then. I'll talk to Pastor Williams. We can do a small ceremony, just a few witnesses. Nothing fancy but legal and proper. She smiled at them both. Welcome to the rest of your lives. After Ruth left, Clara and Thorn stood in the cabin that had become theirs, the weight of their decision settling over them like new snow. They were getting married. In a week. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. Having second thoughts? Thorn asked, watching her face. No. Clara turned to him. You? No. Just thinking about what comes next. What it means. What does it mean to you? Thorn was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on her shoulders. It means I'm choosing to live again. Choosing hope over grief. Choosing you over staying safe in sorrow. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. That's terrifying. But it's also right. It feels right. It feels right to me too. Clara agreed. The week passed in a blur of preparation and nervous excitement. Ruth visited daily, bringing supplies and advice that ranged from practical household management to surprisingly frank discussions about marital relations that left both Clara and Thorn red-faced but laughing. The older woman treated their impending marriage as both sacred and pragmatic, acknowledging the unusual circumstances while insisting that love was love, regardless of how it started. Sarah would approve, Ruth said one afternoon, grown serious. I knew her, James. Knew how she loved you. She'd want you happy. You want you living instead of just surviving. This girl here, she gestured at Clara. She's good for you, good to you. That's what matters. Thank you, Thorn said quietly, for saying that. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you're 5 years married and sick of each other's faces. But Ruth's eyes were kind. Though somehow I don't think that'll be a problem for you two. Clara needed a dress. The thought made her anxious. She owned nothing suitable for a wedding, nothing that didn't remind her of Gerald's house and all that suffering. Ruth solved the problem by arriving one morning with a simple cream-colored dress wrapped in brown paper. It was my daughter's, she said, handing it to Clara. She moved to California and has no need for Montana clothes anymore. Said I could pass it along to someone who'd appreciate it. The dress fit perfectly. Simple cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing elaborate but clean and pretty. When Clara emerged from her room wearing it, Thorn looked up from the harness he was mending and went still. You look beautiful, he said, his voice rough. It's just a dress. It's not just a dress. Thorn stood crossing to her. It's you. And you're beautiful. Clara felt heat flood her face, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. You're not so bad yourself. He laughed, and the sound was becoming more familiar. Less rare. Like he was remembering how. The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, soon to be their bed, she realized with a jolt, and tried to process everything that had happened in 2 months. Sold by her uncle. Bought by a stranger. Found safety. Found friendship. Found something that felt dangerously close to love. Was it love? Could you fall in love in 8 weeks? Or was this just gratitude dressed up in prettier clothes? But when she thought about Thorn, about his patience and his grief, and his quiet strength, about the way he sang while working, and worried when she was sad, and looked at her like she mattered, it didn't feel like gratitude. It felt like something deeper. Something that had roots. A soft knock on her doorframe. She'd left the door open again, had been doing that every night now. Can't sleep either? Thorn asked from the hallway. No. Want some company? Just to talk. Clara nodded, sitting up. Thorn pulled the chair over, sat where he'd sat that night. She'd had the nightmare. Close enough to talk quietly. far enough to be proper. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Clara admitted. What if I'm a terrible wife? What if you regret this? What if... Clara. Thorne leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've been married before. Know what makes a good marriage. It's not being perfect. It's being willing to try, to forgive, to grow together instead of apart. And I see that in you. See your strength and your kindness and your willingness to hope even after everything tried to crush that hope out of you. You see all that? I do, clear as day. He paused. Do you see anything worth keeping in me because I know I'm not much of a prize, broken down widower with a farm that's barely breaking even and enough grief to sink a ship? Clara slid out of bed, knelt in front of him so they were eye to eye. You know what I see? I see a man who kept living when dying would have been easier, who protected someone he had no obligation to protect, who's gentle with horses and patient with people, and still believes in doing right even when nobody's watching. She took his hands. I see someone worth building a life with. Thorne's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How did I get this lucky? We both did. He pulled her up, wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there in the lamplight holding each other. Not kissing, not even talking, just being together, being enough. You should sleep, he said finally. Big day tomorrow. Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep? As long as you need. He sat back in the chair, and Clara crawled into bed. She fell asleep watching him in the dim light, this man who'd become her future, and for the first time since her parents died, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. The wedding day dawned cold and clear. Clara woke with butterflies swarming her stomach and her hands shaking as she dressed. This was it. Today she became someone's wife. Thorne's wife. Today she chose her future instead of having it chosen for her. Ruth arrived early to help with hair and makeup, chattering cheerfully to cover Clara's nerves. You're allowed to be scared, child. Getting married is terrifying even in the best circumstances. But look at me. She cupped Clara's face gently. You're doing the right thing. I feel it in my bones. The ceremony was at the small church in Bitter Creek. Simple and small, just as Ruth had promised. A handful of townspeople attended, some out of genuine goodwill. Others clearly driven by curiosity. Clara barely noticed them. Her entire focus was on Thorne standing at the front in his best clothes with his hair combed back and his eyes locked on hers like she was the only person in the world. Pastor Williams was an old man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He read from Scripture, talked about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage. Clara heard maybe half of it. Too focused on Thorne's hands holding hers, on the calluses she'd come to know. On the way, his thumb rubbed small circles against her palm, like he was trying to soothe her nerves. Do you, James Thorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health, till death do you part? I do. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health, till death do you part? Clara's voice came out stronger than she expected. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Thorne leaned down, and his kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promises neither of them had words for yet. Around them, people applauded politely, but Clara was only aware of him, of this solid, certain, wonderful man who'd chosen her when he could have walked away, who'd given her back her life. They were married. The gathering at Ruth's house afterward was warm and surprisingly joyful. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing and food and laughter. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner dancing until she was breathless and dizzy. But she kept finding her way back to Thorn, drawn like a compass to north. "Happy?" he asked, during a quiet moment, both of them catching their breath on the edge of the celebration. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "But yes, happy too." "Me too." Thorn kissed her forehead. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Thorn." Mrs. Thorn. The name settled over her like a warm cloak. Not Whitmore anymore. Thorn. His. Ready. They rode home through the afternoon light, and if Clara pressed closer against Thorn's back than strictly necessary, neither of them mentioned it. The farm looked peaceful as they crested the rise. Their farm now. Their home. Their future spread out before them in snow and possibility. That night was awkward and tender and ultimately beautiful. Thorn was patient with her inexperience, gentle with her fear, careful not to push when she tensed. He talked to her through it, asked permission for everything, made sure she knew she could stop at any time. "You're safe," he kept saying, "always safe with me." And Clara believed him, let herself trust him, let herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never been with anyone. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, she felt something shift inside her. Some final wall coming down. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the first time she'd said it aloud. Thorn's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. God help me, I do." Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in clean white silence. And in their small cabin, two broken people held each other and slept healing and whole and home. The first weeks of marriage unfolded like pages in a book Clara had never dared to read before. Each day revealed new intimacies, new ways of being together. She learned that Thorn talked in his sleep, sometimes fragments of conversations with ghosts, that he was gentler than his rough exterior suggested, that he sang old working songs while doing chores, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt safe. Thorn learned that Clara was fiercely stubborn about small things, that she hoarded pretty rocks and feathers like treasures, that she had nightmares sometimes and needed to be held without questions until they passed, that she hummed when she was happy and went quiet when she was sad. They fell into new rhythms, building on the foundation they'd already established, but deepening it with the intimacy of marriage. Mornings spent tending animals together, afternoons working on small projects around the farm, evenings by the fire with books or conversation or comfortable silence. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Clara said one evening as they worked on supper together, her kneading bread while he peeled potatoes. Thorn was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to them, Sarah and Emma, when I'm out working. Tell them about my day, about what's growing, about," he paused, "about you. Think they'd like you. Think they'd be glad I'm not alone anymore. I talk to my parents too," Clara admitted. "Tell them I'm safe now, that I found someone good." She shaped the dough with flour-dusted hands. "Think they hear us, the people we've lost. I don't know." Thorn set down the knife, came to stand behind her, resting his chin on top of her head. "But I hope so. Hope they know we're still here, still trying." These moments of quiet honesty stitched them together more firmly than any vow. They were learning each other's scars, the topography of old wounds, and how to navigate around them without causing fresh pain. It wasn't always easy. Some days grief ambushed Thorn, and he'd go silent and distant, working himself to exhaustion rather than feel. Other days, Clara would flinch at a raised voice or sudden movement, her body remembering Gerald's cruelty before her mind caught up. But they learned to recognize the signs, to offer space or comfort as needed, to forgive the rough edges that healing left behind. One afternoon in late March, while organizing supplies in the barn, Clara found a small wooden box tucked behind some tack. Inside were letters tied with ribbon and a daguerreotype of a woman holding a little girl. Sarah and Emma. Clara stared at the image, at Sarah's kind eyes and Emma's bright smile, and felt something complicated twist in her chest. That was them. Thorn's voice came from behind her, quiet. Clara turned, still holding the photograph. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. You're not prying. You're my wife. You have a right to know about them. He took the photograph, his thumb tracing Sarah's face. She was beautiful, inside and out, patient with my moods, made me laugh when I was taking myself too serious. And Emma, his voice cracked. She was everything, smart and funny and fearless, used to follow me everywhere, called me Papa, and meant it like it was the most important word in the world. They sound wonderful, Clara said softly. They were. Thorne looked at her, then his eyes bright with unshed tears. And I miss them every day. Will miss them every day for the rest of my life. But Clara, he cupped her face gently. Loving you doesn't mean I loved them less. Doesn't mean I'm betraying their memory. It just means my heart's big enough for all of it. The grief and the joy. The past and the future. Can you understand that? I can, Clara whispered. Because I feel the same. My parents are gone, but they're not forgotten. And being happy now doesn't dishonor their memory. It honors it. Shows I survived. Shows what they gave me was strong enough to carry me through. Thorne pulled her close, and they stood there in the barn, surrounded by hay and horses, and the smell of leather, holding each other, and their ghosts, learning that love didn't require forgetting, that both sorrow and happiness could exist in the same heart. Winter finally released its grip in April. The snow retreated, revealing brown earth and the first tentative green shoots of spring. The world was waking up, and so were they. Thorne and Clara threw themselves into work preparing for the growing season, clearing fields, mending fences, turning over the garden soil. Ruth visited regularly, bringing news from town and gossip that made them laugh. Gerald's not coming back, she reported one afternoon. Got word he's in Denver. Too much of a coward to show his face here again. Relief washed through Clara, even though she'd felt safe for months now. Knowing Gerald was truly gone, truly out of her life, felt like lifting a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. It's really over, she said to Thorne that night, as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. It's really over, he agreed. You're free, Clara. Really free. Free to build a life. Free to be happy. Free to love and be loved without fear. They started making plans for the future. Real plans that stretched beyond just surviving to the next season. Thorne wanted to expand the horse breeding operation like Sarah had dreamed. Clara wanted a bigger garden, maybe chickens and goats. They talked about building a new room onto the cabin. About maybe someday, if they were blessed children. You want that? Clara asked one night, tentative. Another child after losing Emma. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. I'm terrified of it, he admitted. Terrified of loving someone that much and losing them again. But I'm more terrified of letting fear stop me from living. From loving. He turned to face her. If we're blessed with children, I'll be grateful. And scared out of my mind. But I want it. Want a family with you. Want to fill this place with life and noise and love. I want that too, Clara whispered. Want to give you back what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but new life. New hope. You already gave me that, Thorne said. Everything else is just blessing on top of blessing. May brought warmth and the hard work of planting. Clara's garden took shape: vegetables for eating, herbs for cooking, and medicine flowers, because she deserved pretty things, and Thorne insisted on it. They bought 4 chickens from a farmer in town and built a coop near the barn. The hens settled in and started laying, providing eggs that Clara turned into meals that made Thorne groan with pleasure. You're spoiling me, he said one evening over chicken and dumplings. You deserve to be spoiled. So do you. He reached across the table, taking her hand. You know that, right? You deserve all the good things. The safety and the full stomach and the warm bed. All of it. Clara squeezed his hand throat tight. She was learning to believe that. Slowly. One day at a time. learning that her worth wasn't tied to how much pain she could endure or how useful she could be, that she had value simply by existing, simply by being Clara, Mrs. Clara Thorne now, wife, partner, woman who'd survived hell and found her way to something like heaven. One afternoon in early June, Clara was working in the garden when she heard riders approaching. Her heart jumped, old fear flaring before she could stop it. But when she looked up, she saw Ruth and another woman, younger maybe 30, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Clara," Ruth called, dismounting. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Margaret Davies. She runs the school in Bitter Creek." The school teacher. Clara wiped dirt from her hands and stood suddenly conscious of her messy appearance. "It's lovely to meet you," Margaret said warmly. "Ruth's told me so much about you." "Nothing bad, I hope," Clara said, trying for lightness. "All good." Margaret's smile was genuine. "I actually came to ask you something. Ruth mentioned you've been learning to read better. I'm looking for someone to help at the school a few days a week. Assistant teacher. It doesn't pay much, but really," Clara's heart leaped. "You'd want me. Ruth says you're smart and patient and good with your hands. Those are exactly the qualities I need. And between you and me," Margaret leaned in conspiratorially, "half these children need someone who understands what it's like to struggle, someone who won't give up on them." Clara looked at Ruth, who was beaming. "What does James think?" "Haven't asked him yet," Ruth said. "Wanted to see if you were interested first. You're your own woman, Clara. You can make your own decisions." The idea of working outside the farm, of having something that was just hers, made Clara's chest feel tight with possibility. But she wanted to talk to Thorne first. Not because she needed his permission, but because they were partners, because big decisions should be made together. When he came in that evening, Clara told him about the offer. Watched his face carefully, trying to read his reaction. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I think I want to try it, if you don't mind being alone a few days a week." Thorne smiled. "Mind? I think it's wonderful. You should have something of your own, Clara. Something beyond this farm and me. You're too smart and too strong to be confined to one small world." "The farm isn't confining," Clara protested. "Maybe not. But having choices never hurt anyone." He pulled her into his arms. "Try it. If you like it, keep doing it. If you don't, stop. Simple as that." So Clara became an assistant teacher. 3 days a week, she rode into Bitter Creek and helped Margaret with the youngest children. Taught them letters and numbers, read them stories, showed them that learning could be patient and kind instead of harsh and punishing. The work was hard but rewarding. And coming home to Thorne afterward, telling him about her day while he told her about his, felt like the most natural thing in the world. They were building a life together, a real life, with work they loved and a home they'd made and each other. One evening in late June, Thorne came in from working with the horses, looking thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat down to supper, "about what Sarah wanted, the horse breeding operation. And I think we should do it. Really commit to it. I've got good stock. You've got a natural way with the animals. We could make something real here." "I'd like that," Clara said. "I'd like to build something with you. Something that lasts. It'll be hard work. Long hours. Might be years before we turn a real profit. I'm not afraid of hard work. And I'm not going anywhere." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "We're in this together. Whatever comes." Thorne smiled, and it reached his eyes, transformed his whole face. "Together. I like the sound of that." They started making concrete plans. Thorne would breed Silver and the other mare in the fall. Clara would help with the training of the foals when they came. They'd slowly build a reputation for quality horses, for fair dealing, for breeding stock that was strong and sound and even-tempered. It was a dream. Their dream. Built on the ashes of Sarah's dream, but belonging to both of them now. As summer deepened and the days grew long and warm, Clara felt herself changing, growing. becoming someone she barely recognized from the girl who'd stood barefoot in the snow while her uncle bartered her away. That girl had been broken, scared, certain she was worthless. This woman, Mrs. Clara Thorne, was learning she was strong, learning she was brave, learning she could build a future instead of just surviving a present. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Thorne pulled her close. "You know what I realized today?" he asked. "What?" "I was happy, actually happy. Not just content or not sad, actually happy. First time in 5 years." He kissed the top of her head. "You did that. You brought me back to life." "We did it together," Clara corrected. "You saved me first. Maybe we saved each other." Clara thought about that, about the broken widower and the abused girl who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow made something beautiful, about two people who'd lost everything learning to hope again. "Yeah," she said softly. "Maybe we did." They sat there as the stars came out one by one, as the world turned dark and quiet around them, as the life they were building together settled into place, solid, real, theirs. And for the first time since her parents died, Clara looked at the future and saw not fear, but possibility. Not endings, but beginnings. Not loneliness, but love. She was home. Finally, truly home. Summer gave way to autumn, and with it came changes that Clara hadn't expected. She woke one morning in late August, feeling sick, stumbled out of bed, and barely made it outside before losing what little was in her stomach. Thorne found her on the porch, pale and shaking, and his face went white with worry. "How long has this been happening?" he asked, helping her back inside. 3 days now. Maybe 4. Clara sank into a chair, pressing her hands to her face. "I don't know what's wrong with me." Thorne was quiet for a moment, and when Clara looked up, his expression was strange. Hope and fear mixed together in equal measure. "Clara," he said carefully. "When was your last monthly?" She tried to remember. Couldn't. It had been weeks, maybe longer, since she'd had to deal with rags and cramping. She'd been so busy with the farm and the school and building this life that she hadn't noticed. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh," Thorne echoed. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Clara started laughing and crying at the same time, and Thorne pulled her into his arms and held her while she shook with the enormity of it. "I'm pregnant," she said against his chest. "We're going to have a baby." "We don't know for sure yet," Thorne cautioned, but his voice was thick with emotion. "We should have Ruth look at you. Make certain." Ruth confirmed it the next day, examined Clara with gentle hands, and pronounced her about 6 weeks along, healthy and strong, due sometime in late March or early April. "Congratulations," she said, beaming at them both. "You're going to be parents." Thorne went very still, very quiet. For a moment, Clara thought he might cry. Instead, he just pulled her close and held on like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." The pregnancy was easier than Clara had expected. Some morning sickness that faded after a few weeks. Tiredness that came in waves. But mostly she felt good, strong. Her body was doing what it was meant to do, creating life, and she marveled at the miracle of it. Thorne was simultaneously overjoyed and terrified. He watched Clara, constantly worried about every small thing, insisted she stop riding into town for the schoolwork, at least until the baby came. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Clara protested. "Women have been having babies and working right up until delivery for thousands of years." "I know. I just—" Thorne stopped, his face twisting with old pain. "I lost Emma. Lost Sarah. Can't lose you too. Won't survive it." Clara took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "You're not going to lose me. I'm healthy. Ruth says everything's progressing perfectly. But James, you can't spend the next 7 months wrapped in fear. That's not living. That's not what I want for us, or for this baby. I know. You're right. He covered her hands with his. I'll try. Just be patient with me when I'm being overprotective. Always. The seasons turned and Clara's belly grew. By October, she was showing enough that her dresses needed letting out. By November, she could feel the baby moving little flutters that made her gasp with wonder. Thorn would place his hand on her stomach and wait with breathless patience until he felt it too. That's our child, he'd say, awe in his voice every single time. Our baby. They prepared together. Thorn built a cradle with his own hands, carving it from cedar and polishing it until it gleamed. Clara sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were. How much hope could be contained in such small things? They talked about names, read to Clara's belly, sang lullabies that made them both cry. Winter came early that year. By December, they were snowed in more often than not, which suited them fine. The cabin was warm, their stores were full, and they had everything they needed right here, each other and the baby growing between them. One evening in late January, Clara was sitting by the fire mending baby clothes when she felt Thorn watching her. She looked up to find his eyes soft with something that looked like wonder. What? She asked. Just thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, I was alone in this cabin, half dead inside, going through the motions of living without any real reason to. Now, he gestured at her swollen belly, at the pile of baby things scattered around. Now I have everything. You and a child on the way, and a future that actually means something. How did I get this lucky? We both did, Clara said. Found each other when we needed it most. Made something good out of something terrible. Best bargain I ever made, Thorn said. The words that had become his refrain, his truth. Trading that horse for you, Clara smiled. You always say that. Because it's true. Because I need you to know it. That you were never charity or property or obligation. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You're the best thing that ever happened to me too, Clara said softly. You saved my life, James. In every way that matters. They sat together in the firelight, her hand resting on the swell of their child, his hand covering hers, and Clara felt something settle deep in her chest. This was happiness, real happiness, the kind she'd thought she'd never know. February brought the heaviest snows they'd seen all winter. They were truly trapped now, the drifts too deep for even midnight to manage. But the cabin was cozy, and they had each other, and Ruth had assured them the baby wouldn't come for at least another 6 weeks, so they settled in and waited. Clara was 8 months along now, her belly huge, her back aching constantly. She moved slowly, carefully, and Thorn hovered like an anxious mother hen. I'm fine, she kept telling him. Stop worrying. Can't help it. You're carrying the most precious thing in the world. One night, Clara woke to cramping in her belly. Not painful, just uncomfortable, tightening and releasing in waves. She lay there for a while, trying to decide if this was something to worry about when Thorn stirred beside her. You all right? He asked, immediately alert. I don't know. My stomach feels strange. Thorn was out of bed in seconds, lighting a lamp. Strange, how is it, the baby? Should I try to get to Ruth? James, calm down. I'm fine. It's probably just... She stopped as another wave of tightening hit. Stronger this time. Oh, Clara, talk to me. I think... She pressed her hand to her belly. I think this might be it. The baby's coming. The color drained from Thorn's face. Now... But Ruth said 6 weeks. It's too early. You can't... We need... He stopped, took a breath, visibly collecting himself. All right. What do you need? I need you to not panic, Clara said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. And I need you to help me figure out if this is real labor or just practice. Ruth told me about this. Braxton Hicks contractions. They can feel real, but they're not. They spent the next hour timing the pains. They were irregular at first, coming and going without pattern. False labor, probably. Clara started to relax, but then around dawn they changed, became regular, stronger, definitely real. "I have to get Ruth," Thorne said, already pulling on his clothes. "You can't ride through this snow. Watch me." His face was set with determination and barely controlled fear. "I'm not delivering this baby alone. I can't, Clara. I can't do that again. Can't watch someone I love die because I wasn't good enough." Clara grabbed his hand, made him look at her. "I'm not going to die. Women have babies all the time. I'm strong and healthy, and this baby is ready to be born. But yes, get Ruth, carefully. Don't you dare break your neck getting to town, you hear me?" "I hear you." He kissed her hard. "I love you. I'll be back as fast as I can." He was gone before she could respond, leaving Clara alone with the contractions that were getting stronger and closer together. She tried to remember everything Ruth had told her. Breathe through the pain, walk if she could, stay calm. The hours crawled by. The contractions got worse. Clara paced the cabin leaning against walls when the pain peaked, breathing through gritted teeth. Where was Thorne? How long did it take to get to town and back? Too long. It was taking too long. The baby wasn't waiting. Clara barely made it to the bed before the urge to push became overwhelming. She grabbed onto the headboard, bearing down with everything she had, and felt something give. Felt the baby move lower. Felt her body doing what it was designed to do, even though she was terrified and alone, and had no idea if she was doing this right. The door burst open. Thorne stumbled in, covered in snow, with Ruth right behind him, both of them breathing hard from the ride. "Thank God!" Clara gasped. "The baby's coming, right now." Ruth took control immediately, barking orders at Thorne to boil water and get clean cloths while she examined Clara with quick, efficient hands. "You're doing perfect, honey," Ruth said. "Baby's in position, nice and low, few more pushes, and you'll meet your child." Thorne was back at Clara's side, gripping her hand hard enough to hurt his face, white as the snow outside. "I'm here, right here. You can do this." The next hour was pain and effort, and Ruth's calm voice guiding her through. Push and breathe and rest. Push and breathe and rest. Clara felt like she was being split apart, like her body was breaking, but she kept going because she had no choice. Because the baby was coming, whether she was ready or not. "One more big push," Ruth said. "Come on, Clara. Give me everything you've got." Clara bore down with a scream that might have been rage or triumph or both, and then suddenly there was release. Pressure and pain giving way to shocking emptiness. And crying. A baby crying. "It's a girl," Ruth announced, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a daughter." A daughter. Clara barely heard her, barely processed the words. All she could focus on was the red, squalling infant that Ruth was wrapping in a clean cloth and placing in her arms. So small, so perfect. With dark hair and Thorne's eyes and tiny fists that waved furiously at the injustice of being born. "Hello, little one." Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my love." Thorne was crying too, openly and unashamed. He knelt beside the bed, reaching out with shaking hands to touch his daughter's tiny head. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Clara, she's perfect." "She is." Clara looked at her husband, at this man who'd lost a child and somehow found the courage to love another. "What should we name her?" Thorne was quiet for a moment, his finger tracing their daughter's tiny hand. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Hope. I want to name her Hope. Because that's what she is. That's what you both are. My hope, my future, my everything." "Hope Thorne." Clara tested the name. "I like it." Hope squirmed in her arms, settling against Clara's chest with a sigh that sounded impossibly content for someone who'd just been forced out into a cold world. She rooted around, found what she was looking for, and latched on with determined strength that made Clara gasp and then laugh. She knows what she wants, Ruth observed, cleaning up efficiently. That's a good sign. Strong girl you've got there. Strong. Clara looked at her daughter, at this tiny person who'd fought her way into the world during a snowstorm when it was too early and too hard, and felt pride swell in her chest. Hope was a fighter. Just like her mother. Just like her father. Born from love and loss and the stubborn determination to survive. Ruth stayed for 2 days, making sure both Clara and the baby were healthy, before she'd risk the ride back to town. She taught Clara how to nurse, how to swaddle, how to read the baby's cries. Taught Thorn how to change diapers and hold his daughter, and not panic every time she made a sound. She's healthy, Ruth kept assuring them. Strong lungs, good color, eating well. You two did good. When Ruth finally left, promising to check on them as soon as the roads cleared, Clara and Thorn were alone with their daughter. Really alone. Responsible for this tiny life that depended on them for everything. I'm terrified. Thorn admitted that first night, holding Hope while Clara rested. What if I do something wrong? What if I can't protect her? What if... James. Clara reached out, touching his arm. You're already a wonderful father. Look at how she's sleeping. She feels safe with you. She knows she's loved. I just keep thinking about Emma, about how I failed her. You didn't fail her. You tried to save her, and sometimes trying isn't enough, but that doesn't make it failure. Clara pushed herself up, ignoring the ache in her body. Emma knew she was loved, and Hope knows it too. That's what matters. Not that you keep them from every harm, you can't do that, but that you love them with everything you have, that you try, that you're there. Thorn looked at her, his eyes bright. When did you get so wise? When I became a mother about 12 hours ago. Clara smiled. Apparently it comes with the job. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful and occasionally terrifying. Hope needed constant attention, feeding every few hours, changing, rocking, soothing. Clara barely slept. Thorn took on every other task in the house so she could focus on the baby. They moved through their days in a haze of sleepless devotion. But Clara had never been happier. Looking at her daughter's face, feeling that tiny weight in her arms, watching Thorn sing lullabies in his rough voice, while Hope stared up at him with wide eyes, it was everything. More than she'd ever imagined having. One night, when Hope was about a month old, Clara woke to find Thorn's side of the bed empty. She could hear his voice coming from the other room, soft and low. She got up carefully, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cold, and found him standing by the window, holding their daughter. I'm going to do better by you, he was saying. Going to keep you safe and loved, and teach you how to be strong and kind like your mama. You're never going to doubt you're wanted, never going to feel like you're not enough, because you are. You're everything. Clara's throat tightened. She stayed in the doorway, watching her husband promise their daughter the world, and felt her heart overflow. She's lucky to have you, Clara said softly. Thorn turned, not startled, like he'd known she was there all along. We're lucky to have each other, all three of us. Come back to bed. You need sleep too. In a minute. Just want to hold her a little longer. Clara understood. She felt the same way. Like she couldn't get enough of looking at Hope, of memorizing every detail, of assuring herself this was real. That they'd been blessed with this perfect, impossible gift. Spring came slowly that year. The snow retreated inch by stubborn inch, revealing the brown earth beneath. By the time Hope was 2 months old, the world was waking up around them. Green shoots pushing through soil, birds returning, life renewing itself like it did every year, undeterred by winter's cruelty. Clara ventured outside for the first time in weeks, Hope bundled against her chest in a sling Clara had fashioned from fabric. The sun was warm on her face. The air smelled like earth and growing things. Hope blinked at the brightness, tiny face scrunching in confusion, before relaxing as she decided she approved. Thorn was in the corral, working with Copper, the young gelding, who wasn't quite so young anymore. He looked up when Clara approached, and his whole face softened. "Look at you two," he said, coming to the fence. "My girls. We got restless, needed fresh air. How are you feeling, really? Tired, sore, happy?" Clara smiled at him over Hope's head. Really happy. They stood there in the spring sunshine, the three of them, and Clara thought about how far they'd come. From that terrible day in the snow when she'd been sold like property to this moment of profound peace and joy. It hadn't been easy. Wasn't always going to be easy. There would be hard days ahead, challenges they couldn't predict, losses they'd have to weather. But they'd face them together. As a family. As people who'd survived the worst and chosen hope anyway. "I love you," Clara said suddenly, fiercely. "Both of you. More than I have words for." "I love you too." Thorn reached across the fence, touching Hope's tiny hand, then Clara's face. "You saved me. You know that, you and this little one. Saved me from dying inside. Gave me a reason to live again." "We saved each other," Clara corrected. "That's what love does." The months blurred together after that. Hope grew and changed, developing a personality that was equal parts stubborn determination and sweet gentleness. She had Clara's dark hair and Thorn's gray eyes, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. She learned to hold her head up, to roll over, to grab things with her tiny hands. Every milestone was a celebration. The farm prospered too. Silver foaled in May, producing a beautiful filly that Thorn said showed real promise. The garden exploded with growth under Clara's care. The chickens multiplied. They bought 2 goats that provided milk and cheese and kept the grass down around the cabin. Word spread about the quality of Thorn's horses, and people started coming from surrounding counties to buy or trade. Money came in. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to expand, to build, to dream bigger. One evening in late summer, when Hope was about 6 months old, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Hope dozed in Clara's arms, content and full and perfect. Thorn had his arm around Clara's shoulders, pulling her close. "I was thinking," he said, "about expanding the cabin, adding another room or 2. Space for Hope to grow. Maybe space for—" He paused. "Maybe space for brothers or sisters, if we're blessed." Clara looked at him surprised and pleased. "You want more children?" "If you do. If you're willing." Thorn's hand covered hers where it rested on Hope's back. "I know it's hard. No childbirth isn't easy. But Clara, being a father again, it's the greatest gift you could have given me. And watching you be a mother, seeing how natural you are with her, how much love you have to give. Yeah. I want more. Want to fill this place with children and noise and life." "I want that too," Clara said softly. "Want to give Hope siblings. Want to give you the family you lost. Want to build something that lasts." "We're already building it." Thorn kissed the top of her head. "Every day, every moment. We're building something that's going to outlast us both." Clara looked out at the farm they'd built together. The barn standing strong against the evening sky. The fences they'd mended. The garden she'd planted. The horses grazing in the pasture. The cabin that had transformed from a tomb into a home. And in her arms, the daughter who was living proof that beauty could bloom from ashes. That Hope could survive anything. She thought about the girl she'd been. 19 years old, barefoot in the snow, being sold for a horse by the man who was supposed to protect her. That girl had thought her life was over, had believed she was worthless, had given up on any dream of happiness or safety or love. She couldn't have imagined this, couldn't have dreamed that the stranger who bought her would become her husband, her partner, her best friend, the father of her child, that the transaction that had felt like the end of everything would actually be the beginning of everything. "What are you thinking about?" Thorn asked, reading her silence. "How far we've come. How much has changed." Clara turned to look at him. This man who'd given her back her life, A year and a half ago, you bought me for a horse. Best bargain I ever made, Thorne said automatically, then caught himself. Sorry, I know I say that too much. No. Clara shook her head. Say it as much as you want, because it's true for me too. Being bought by you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Sounds terrible when I say it like that, but it's true. You didn't just save me. You showed me I was worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. You were always worth it. I just helped you see what was already there. Maybe, Clara smiled. Or maybe we both were half people who found a way to become whole together. Hope stirred in her arms, making small, contented noises in her sleep. The sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. The chickens settled in their coop. The world turned toward night, peaceful and safe. And in that moment, Clara understood something profound. She'd spent so much of her life afraid. Afraid of her uncle. Afraid of pain. Afraid of a future that held nothing but suffering. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. Not the house, though the cabin was home too. Not the land, though she loved every inch of this farm. But the people. Thorne and Hope. The family they'd made from wreckage and trauma and stubborn determination to survive. This was home. This was everything. Years from now, Clara thought she'd tell Hope this story. Would explain how she'd come to be here, how her parents had found each other in the worst circumstances and made something beautiful anyway. Would teach her daughter that worth wasn't determined by how you started, but by how you chose to continue. That love could bloom anywhere, even in winter, even in snow, even in the darkest moments. That hope, precious, perfect hope, was proof that second chances existed, that healing was possible, that the story didn't end when terrible things happened. It just began a new chapter. Thank you, Clara said, suddenly looking at Thorne, for everything, for taking a chance on a broken girl standing barefoot in the snow, for being patient, for teaching me what love actually looks like, for giving me this. She gestured at Hope, at the farm, at the life they'd built. All of this. Thank you, Thorne replied, for being brave enough to hope, for choosing to stay, for loving a broken man and his ghosts, for giving me a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just not dying, for this little miracle in your arms, for being my wife, my partner, my home. They sat together as the stars came out one by one, as Hope slept peaceful and safe between them, as the life they'd fought for settled into place around them like a blessing. Two people who'd been sold and bought, lost, and found broken and healed. Two people who'd taken the worst transaction imaginable and turned it into the best thing that ever happened to either of them. Clara had been traded for a horse at 19, and she'd thought it was the end. But it was just the beginning of safety, of love, of family, of a future so bright it hurt to look at directly. She'd been bought, but she'd also been freed. And in that freedom, she'd found everything worth living for.